Hey guys, how's everybody doing? With all this talk of roosters this weekend, I thought I would share a few things I've learned over the years dealing and keeping roosters. I'll start off by telling you how I have always raised roosters, and that has been from chicks up. I don't know, I probably have at some point brought in an adult or older rooster, but never into a flock with an existing adult rooster. So mine have always come in either hatched here or bought as chicks. That's how I've done it. I've always heard roosters will fight to the death, and we've all heard the horror stories of the, bird fighting rings and everything. I personally have not had that happen, fortunately, although I've heard it happens and I know it does happen. I've tried to never let it get to that point. By only bringing in chicks and immature cockerels, that cuts down on a lot of that because you don't have adults fighting head on trying to introduce them to each other. I have kept roosters separate, and I have found that after about 3 days, when you try to introduce those roosters back in together, good luck, because it all kind of falls apart after about 3 days, and then you're going to have some fighting. So once they're separate, I have always kept them separate, or you're going to get into problems. I've always read that roosters can coexist together, and I have experienced that many times. But I have found that when I keep roosters together in the same coop together, there is always one head rooster. And that head rooster is gonna not like that other one around. And there's gonna be fighting whenever the subordinate or the subordinate rooster tries to mate the hens. There's gonna be problems over food. So when you're keeping more than one rooster or cockerel together, you just have to remember they have a pecking order, just like the hens do. So what just happened here was my two roosters were not coexisting well. Do I think that they would have fought to the death? I'm not sure about that. If I tried shoving them into the one coop in the winter with the one enclosed run, there probably would be injuries for sure. I'm not sure how far it would go, but they weren't working out. And in keeping peace with the flock, when actually the one rooster that I really want, I don't want to do 2 coops this year, so for the better for everyone, Oreo needed to find a new home. So that's how I dealt with that. Now, here's another one. Mean roosters. I've talked about this in the past. We don't do mean roosters anymore, but I have read so many things about how they can be tamed. I'm sure some of you have done it, and I congratulate you. It has not worked here, I can tell you that. When a rooster starts being mean here, it's usually gone. In my opinion, life is too short to be scared to walk out into your yard because my roosters tend to free range and I don't want to be looking back over my shoulder all the time. I have found that usually by around 25 to 30 weeks, if a rooster is going to get mean, he starts showing signs of it by then, usually attacking my boot by around 25 weeks old. And depending on what you do with your chickens, 25 weeks old still makes a very edible rooster, by the way. Sorry if I made anybody mad with that comment. But I have used mean roosters for breeding in the past and heard stories about where those little guys went, and they were mean as snakes, just like their father. So I don't do that anymore. So the way we do these roosters, by bringing in chicks or hatching our own, they all grow up together in the flock. So we usually have a head rooster who keeps those cockerels in line, and everything goes really smooth. Normally, the oldest rooster is the one that kind of runs the show. I did have one instance once, though, where I had my older rooster who had been around for a couple years hatched out a son that I was going to keep as a second rooster. And over time, by the end of that summer, that younger rooster actually ousted his dad out of the flock. There was a lot of fighting, and he ran who had been the head rooster like completely out of the flock and wouldn't let him around. It was really actually very sad. So we ended up not being able to keep both of those roosters. But normally, in our experience, that is not how that usually goes. As it is now, the way that we keep multiple roosters I think the best way is probably separate coops, separate pens, making sure that they are interacting all the time and that they have a lot of space. That's kind of the key. I like to keep a backup rooster, but if they're not getting along, sometimes it's just easier not to do that. So here's another interesting thing we found one time. We had a little bantam, adorable rooster in with our flock, and I hatched chicks out of those eggs. And it turns out that yes, even the smallest little bantam roosters can fertilize full-size chicken eggs. So if you think they can't and you're trying to run some purebred chicken breeding operations, don't take that for granted, because that happened here. Saying all that, roosters are probably my very favorite chicken. I really like roosters. I love hearing them crow. I think they're funny to watch and they're beautiful usually. But I really struggle with roosters and always have. Our favorite rooster was the first one we ever had, and he was a Buff Orpington named Rui, and he was like the sweetest. Just would sit on your lap. He was so cute. We loved him, and it was when the kids were littler. He was our first, we were first-time chicken people, and we got way too attached to that rooster. So ever since then, I have tried to not be as attached, but I really struggle with it because I usually only have one or two. So you just get used to seeing them all of the time. So roosters are still a struggle with me. And actually Oreo, even though you may remember, was not the rooster that I wanted to keep out of the Americanas. He was kind of like a second, and ended up being the only rooster. He was never intended to be kept and wasn't what I wanted for breeding, but I still struggled finding him a home, and really don't like to just get rid of the roosters when they're not needed here. They don't fit into the flock anymore. But if you're going to keep chickens and you have a plan and you're doing it for a specific reason, such as breeding or for productivity, you got to make those decisions sometimes. And roosters are the area that I probably struggle with the most. A question that I see comes up a lot is whether roosters will kill little chicks or not. And we usually run a very mixed flock in here, and I have broody hens in with the main flock with their chicks, and I will tell you I've never seen that be a problem with a rooster in our experience. Now, compared to many of you watching and many people out there, we have basically no experience with chickens, but I've never seen it happen. They've always been very good. Sometimes they'll be very curious and actually protect like the hen and her chicks. So I have not seen that be a problem. As a matter of fact, I've seen a lot of the roosters really like the chicks. And when I bring out a group of chicks and kind of have them separated off inside the main runs, that rooster's over there hanging out with those chicks, like really likes them. Roosters seem to usually want more stuff in their flock, so they do pretty well with it. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for watching. I'd love to hear some of your rooster experiences in the comments if you have some wisdom and knowledge to share your experiences about roosters. I'll catch you guys the next time.